Hello, everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where we break down commodities markets, sound money principles, and geopolitics, all with the goal of making you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day. Today is April 10th, 2026, and I'm thrilled to welcome Martin Armstrong to the program, an economic forecaster who has been called on by governments around the world in times of crisis, including the Reagan administration, Margaret Thatcher, and others. Martin breaks down the Iran war and the on-again, off-again ceasefire, and he explains why he believes that this conflict is part of a broader trend that will see the expansion of wars across the world, leading to massive civil unrest that will ultimately result in the collapse of the current political system and hopefully a return to true democracy. Martin also outlines why the EU and NATO must go to war with Russia to survive, why fuel and food shortages could become a serious problem in the aftermath of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, how the madness of Benjamin Netanyahu is holding the world hostage, and so much more. So strap yourselves in for my conversation with Martin Armstrong. Martin Armstrong, it is great to have you back on Commodity Culture. Last time I had you on the show was at the end of 2025. You said that a panic cycle was coming in 2026 and war was going to ramp up. And boy, did you prove to be correct on that one. Could you help us unpack this current conflict between Iran, the US, and Israel? Because there's so much confusion as to why this war is happening, the players behind the scenes. What is your take?
Basically, Netanyahu's been trying to sell this war on Iran to just about every president for the last 45 years. He made a big speech before the United Nations in 2010 or 2012 saying, oh, we have to take them out. He's, in my opinion, I think he is as deranged as the people he hates on the other side. I mean, they all just hate each other. So this isn't something that is negotiable in the sense that I'll give you boardwalk for Park Place. It's this is deeply entrenched, and I disagree with Netanyahu because there is no end game to this. I mean, all you do is think that this endless war, as if you can conquer the other side and make it all better. I mean, you're just creating another generation of people that are going to hate you. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think he's honestly deranged or possessed or something. I don't know. But, it's been seriously questioned how he was even in the Situation Room to make this argument. All right. On top of that, my concern was that there's been this assumption. Trump listened to him. Go in, we kill the Ayatollah, we knock out their ballistic missiles and their nukes, and it's all over in 1 hour. I think Trump wrongly believed that because it was a Venezuela type thing. And let's face the facts. Nobody, not even the Roman Empire, was ever able to conquer Persia. It's a very mountainous area. You're not going to get, it's not like Iraq where you can just, a flat plain that you can drive in, tanks, etc. I'm concerned that, even the reports that came out from the meetings that the New York Times published. I had heard before that, and I was actually up in Canada. I did a couple of conferences there, and I was shocked that there was no consideration whatsoever about the Straits of Hormuz. And I said there publicly, I said, kind of was in an argument with some people, and I said, if I were going to do this, the first thing I would have done was secure the Strait of Hormuz before the first bomb went. I mean, I don't know, is Washington full of just morons anymore? But there is another serious issue that people don't even understand. All the cables that connect the world financial system go through the Straits of Hormuz. All right. I had offices there in UAE. They were attacking, the AI, project there, which was a $30 billion project. Amazon, OpenAI, all their systems are there. Okay. People don't know this. They attacked it. They did damage, not, overwhelming, but the banking system there was down for 7 days. My staff was there. I finally got them out, but, if they really wanted, you're talking about, ending the regime of Iran. So this is like a death, sentence. When you're putting anybody up against that, then there's, everything's on the table. If I'm on that side and you're saying, okay, fine, that's it, I'm dead, you're going with me. I mean, I don't know. It's this is why, honestly, Netanyahu's been selling this plan for decades. And this is why it has been rejected. First of all, it's, it takes two to tango, and if you're going to, Netanyahu's, I'm afraid, a lot of people are talk about that he's being driven by, biblical prophecies. And, and Samuel was saying, he's identified, Iran as their ancient enemy. And, in the Bible, with passage of Samuel, it says, kill them, their wives, their children, their donkeys and camels and everything, and, a lot of scholars have had very difficulty, interpreting that passage. So, but, he seems, and he, when I think an Iranian missile hit, he says, "We remember," which is quoting that. So it's hard to say, what is driving him, but I'm afraid it's more in that line that he does not give a shit about the rest of the world. And you're seeing, in my opinion, you should take Netanyahu and Zelensky, and the two of them should be locked up in a padded cell for the rest of their life. You have Trump removing some of the sanctions on Russian oil to help the world, and Zelensky goes no way and attacks, Russian oil to reduce it down to 40%. Again, he doesn't give a shit about Europe, the world, or anybody else but himself. I mean, we have two psychopaths here that, and Trump is now hostage to this thing. Once he agreed, he's kind of stuck.
The sponsor of today's episode is ARC Silver Gold Osmium. Owner Ian Everard is praised even by his competitors as one of the most honest and level-headed bullion dealers in the United States. They have some great prices. You can see some of them displayed right now on screen. Take advantage of these specials today by reaching out to Ian at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. Make sure to tell him, of course, that Commodity Culture sent you. And now, back to the interview. Well, let me ask you this, because the thing that Zelensky and Netanyahu have in common is that they're both incredibly corrupt and also could potentially be convicted of corruption, accused and convicted, should these wars stop and should things kind of return to normalcy. I mean, Netanyahu was set to go on trial before the events of October 7th. Do you think that is part of the logic that's driving him to continue these wars for as long as possible, both in Lebanon and in Iran as well, to try to just keep his grip on power, remain in his role so that he doesn't have to face justice?
Yeah, look, I don't know if it's afraid to face justice. He has asked for pardons, but I am putting out a report, The Fate of Israel. And I have gone through everything. And October 7th, everything that I can see, I mean, our computer picked that up in advance. It was well documented that Hamas was training people in the summer of 23, months in advance. And that was just ignored. And I mean, nobody's been able to get through their border, and suddenly they could. What you do need for war is you need to be attacked. That's when you get to rally around the flag. And I believe that Netanyahu knew what was coming. Egypt said that they had warned them days in advance and nothing took place. So once that happened, all right, that gave him the green light for all of this. The Gaza, the Lebanon, I think he is, honestly, I do think he seems to be driven by his biblical interpretations. So whether it's just to get out of the charges, I don't know. But I will say this: our computer is warning about June and July. He is up for election, which he cannot be extended beyond October 27th. So if we look at what has taken place here, this is a complete failure. He didn't get a single one of his 3 points for the whole purpose of this. And the regime is still there. The the uranium is still there. And he's been talking about this uranium and why we got to go in and take and destroy them. And like I said, that's back in the 90s he was saying this. He stood up with a chart, at the United Nations in 2012. All right. If I were them and I had a nuke, I'd be using it by now. I mean, but he said the same thing about Iraq. Oh, weapons of mass destruction. There's 3 countries, doing nukes, etc. And he was behind going in that. So, I mean, he's not trustworthy for anything that he says. And I do know, at least one senior general said you cannot trust in Israeli intelligence. It's always skewed and it's optimistic at best. But, honestly, I don't see this as subsiding. One of the conditions that Iran wanted was that this ends the war. And Netanyahu's not about to allow that to happen. And that's why Trump, I think, finally realized too late that he's dealing with a psychopath, because he went in to deal with the ceasefire with Iran and didn't invite Netanyahu. So this is not a very good situation, and I don't see it getting better. And Iran has, the Straits of Hormuz. You can take down the tankers. That's one thing. All right. So you got maybe 3 million barrels in a tanker. You take. What is really serious here is that they have looked at all the other Gulf states where American bases are, and they've attacked their refineries, etc. And people have to understand that, all right, in Asia, we've got offices in Thailand, and there's no gas around. But besides the gasoline, all right, diesel. All the shipping fleets run on diesel. You're talking about a food shortage. Besides the 30% of the world fertilizer goes through there. Iran is extremely important. Yes, fine. It's a religious, the people should rise up and do their own thing when they can. All right. But for the rest of the world to intervene, when there's so much at stake, I don't think this was well thought out. And it's typical Netanyahu. Let's just do this. I hate them, and I want to fulfill my dream. That's it. And he brought up nothing about the Strait of Hormuz. What about the world economy? Nothing. Always just him.
So how bad could this get in terms of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz? Obviously, we know 20+% of the world's oil supplies go through the Strait of Hormuz, natural gas, urea, all sorts of other very important commodities and minerals. And I've heard the food shortage argument before, that this could result in that type of crisis. Now, we know about the fuel shortage happening in several countries. How bad do you think this could get on a global scale? Should people around the world be stocking up on food and perhaps clean water at this point in time? What do you see as the ultimate outcome of this? What's the worst case scenario, and where do you think things will land?
Yeah, I think, honestly, you should have a couple years of food, mainly because even with the worst case scenario aside, there's usually food shortages during war anyhow. You had, the Victory Gardens from World War II, etc. You already have energy protests and farmers going crazy in Greece and Ireland. Without, fertilizer, you're talking about, serious food shortage, mainly in Europe. What our computer has been projecting, and I've said, for the last couple of years, the U.S. would go into a recessionary period, but Europe could go into a depression. And when you look at the facts here, U.S. only gets 3%, maybe 5% max oil from the Middle East. So we're not looking at fuel shortages in the United States. But Asia's, dry. Europe is dry. So you see things outside much worse. And then this is, again, unfortunately, Trump just listened to Netanyahu. And the problem here is that he didn't consult with anybody else. And now Europe is paying the price for him listening to Netanyahu. And that's splitting NATO. It's a real mess everywhere you go. The only benefit out of this has been it's made Russia and China stronger.
Do you think there's a blackmail angle here? Because this is obviously one of the main talking points that's getting thrown around on social media. We saw a very bizarre type of press conference with Melania Trump coming out and with no prompting, giving some speech about how she doesn't know Jeffrey Epstein or she's not Jeffrey Epstein's friend. People are speculating that this could perhaps be her preemptively getting ahead of some big news item that's going to drop about Trump's involvement with Epstein. And of course, people believe the reason that Netanyahu has so much power over Trump is because of blackmail. Do you buy into any of that, or do you think something else is going on behind the scenes?
No, this is um, pretty much Netanyahu. He's been trying this with every president up to right up to Trump. I don't think you need to go into that type of a conspiracy theory. I mean, look, from what I know, there was no consideration whatsoever of any of the downside risks. And I know you can argue about Trump. That's nice, but what about the other people that were there? CIA, the rest, they remain silent. I mean, again, I think it was this nonsense of believing that they could take it out and win in an hour. The arrogance of some of these people is that simply because the United States has the largest military, that means you automatically win. And if they ever opened up a damn history book, they would find out it's exactly wrong. Persia was the biggest. They were defeated by the Greeks. All right. Alexander the Great, all right, defeated by the Romans. All right. Carthage was the big one. They were defeated by the fledgling Romans that came up. I mean, this is the biggest always falls. There is no exception to that. And it's usually because of hubris or arrogance that, like we're seeing right now, oh, we're the United States. We can walk into any country and just take them. Really? You know, if you don't know what you're doing, you're looking at bringing down the entire world. And that's the real risk here. That, I mean, I'm no military genius, but if I'm sitting in Iran, I'm going to take out the cables. That will be my last one. I'm going to attack the refineries. All right. You keep coming after me. I'm taking out all the refineries. That's their biggest trump card. All right. And you bring Europe to its knees and Asia to its knees, and they're going to be screaming in Trump's ear. I mean, that's what I would do. You're talking about, strategy here. And then worst case scenario, you take out the whole damn banking system. And I didn't have to go to West Point to figure that one out, but, so I question is there's nobody there that even understood these strategic risks in the Hormuz. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like we have Trump aside, the rest of them there are what, a bunch of morons?
Well, do you think there were military brass, military commanders who did understand the risks and they were ignored or even fired? As we saw recently, there was a large round of firings by Pete Hegseth of military officials. Now, nobody knows the exact reason why, I don't think, but perhaps they brought up these issues at some point. And also, as kind of a follow-up to that, if this really does go in the direction you're talking about, are we witnessing the end of the American empire? Are we witnessing the end of American hegemony at this point? And if so, what does that world look like?
Yeah, I mean, look, the computer's been projecting that for 2032 anyhow. This is just how you get there. We do see that China will rise as the new financial capital of the world after 2032. And, I've said that, been on record, for a decade. And, the United States won't completely fall apart in that sense, but it'd be more like the British Empire. It'd be a memory more than anything else. But you have also globally, everybody is so polarized, left versus right, that what you're simultaneously seeing is a move towards separation. So Europe will break up. You're seeing that already with conflicts back and forth. Canada will split. The West will leave the East. United States will break up. You even saw, California, they wanted to separate. And I think the rest of the United States would say, yes, please go, and I'll give you a quarter for the bus ticket, but it's so at the same time, these economic impacts from energy and food, etc. What they do is they cause other disputes to rise to the surface. So, for example, you're seeing what our computer was warning about, that this would be World War III, but not like World War I or II, where it's one adversary you're facing. It's pockets of uprisings everywhere. So it's Thailand versus Cambodia all of a sudden, India versus Pakistan, and Pakistan versus Afghanistan, and then you got North Korea versus the South, China versus Taiwan. It's everywhere. Europe. So when you turn the economy down like this, and we see it getting much worse going into 2028, all these disputes will rise to the surface. And so that's what our computer's been projecting. And I think it's been the best thing out there since sliced bread. It's not biased. It's called all the shots correctly. And it's been, I think, a light at the end of the tunnel to show us where we're actually going, and what hopefully that these republic forms of government will come to an end, and we'll go back more towards a direct democracy. Like, we should be asked, shall we go to war with Netanyahu against Iran? Congress was not even asked, no less the people. All right. And then they tell us we live in a democracy. This is total, absolute BS. We don't get to decide anything. Vietnam War, the same thing. You're 18, old enough to get drafted. You weren't old enough to even have a drink. You had to be 21 to vote. So, but that's democracy. No, it's not. This is all nothing but, pomp and circumstance. And, we should, cheer because we live in democracy and fight to the death for it. For what? Where's my right to vote?
Yeah, exactly. Now, for those who don't know what Martin's talking about when he references the computer, it's a Socrates AI program that you began developing back in the 70s, and has made it analyzes all sorts of markets and world events, geopolitics. So I want to pose the question. You said that perhaps the Iran war is not the end of what's going to be a much more diversified conflict in terms of other wars popping up around the world. Is that what Socrates is predicting, that we will see the spread of more war and conflict across the world and not just isolated to the Middle East?
Yeah. um, if Iran really damages the refineries, and if Israel, which Netanyahu is completely insane, in my opinion, if he arbitrarily goes after their production, they're going to take out everybody else's production. Okay, that's going to create massive civil unrest on a global scale. Also, he can, win his war. And then you got, the crazy nut job Zelensky over there, you know, trying to destroy Russia's. You're fighting for the Donbass, which are Russians. They've been there for 200 years. You want that territory. You've outlawed their language, their religion. I mean, you're just a piece of shit, really. That's not the way to get peace, or you know, we had employees in Ukraine, and most of them, they don't believe he was even legitimately elected.
Now, I also want to talk about Germany because we're talking about conflict potentially spreading. Germany is now requiring, I don't know if it's official yet, but it's either in the works or it's happening already, military aged males to seek permission if they want to leave the country for more than 3 months. Now, Germany has been one of the figureheads in advancing this idea of the militarization of the EU. We need to get ready for war with Russia. Um, do you think we're entering a world? Because I know we've spoken about this before, and some other people have brought this up of a potential conflict between NATO and Russia. How would you see that playing out? Do you think boots will eventually be on the ground? Is this the reason that Germany is starting to potentially move eventually towards a full-on draft?
Oh yeah, I mean, the EU cannot survive without war with Russia. It's breaking up, and it's just like Netanyahu. All right, afraid of losing power, he pushes this war. Europe is afraid of losing power. Economically, they are a disaster. All right, and you have Macron, who I think lives in La La Land and really thinks that they can conquer Russia, get to 75 trillion in natural resource assets, and then rise again like the Roman Empire to rule the world. And I was saying that this for a couple years. People said, "Oh, really?" Then NATO came out, Root came out, and he actually said, "If you think that you can conquer Russia without the United States, you're dreaming." So he publicly finally came out and said what I've been hearing for 2 years behind the curtain.
Now, staying on the EU, a very consequential election is being held in Hungary in just a couple of days to determine if Viktor Orban remains prime minister there. Just recently, here where I am in Serbia, explosive devices were discovered near a gas pipeline leading to Hungary, with some seeing Ukraine as the culprit. We've seen some reports on social media that the Ukrainian government or somebody involved with Ukraine is offering Ukrainians money to go and protest in Hungary. What are your thoughts on all of these developments, and what are the consequences if Viktor Orban loses this election?
Just more of a complete mess. The EU wants him out, and I can say that I believe the EU sanctioned Zelensky to try and take out the pipelines to Hungary. And it's I mean, Viktor Orban is probably the last sound mind in the EU, and that's why they hate him. He's blocked giving money to Ukraine, etc. I mean, they want him out because they want war.
And is this the end of? I want to just take a step back for a moment and look at international law, because it feels like it's being thrown completely out the window. Nobody's being held accountable. The international criminal courts, of course, have said Netanyahu is culpable for the actions that he's taken in Gaza and has committed a genocide. We know South Africa has put forward a case against them. Supposedly, Italy is potentially also going to be joining that. But there's never any consequences for these types of things. And as we kind of watch helplessly on social media, seeing videos of Israel bombing Lebanon and civilians being killed, and yet it seems like nobody has the power to actually do anything. What are your thoughts there? Is international law just dead at this point? Is this going to become a every country for themselves, do whatever you want sort of system?
Yeah, look, I mean, what Netanyahu has done is far worse. His assassination tactics, um, you know, if you call a peace conference, would you go when you know he uses that as a means to kill you? How do you negotiate? I mean, he has thrown international law out the window. He doesn't give a shit about anything. He's obsessed, maybe by the devil himself. I don't know, but I mean, he's just obsessed with this quest to destroy Iran, and which is not achievable. So, what are you accomplishing? Just endless wars for decades to come. You're just creating such hatred. Oh, I don't like the Jews because they killed my father. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It's a cycle of violence.
And you mentioned republics and a potential end up ahead when all of the dust settles to the forms of government that we currently ascribe to. Could you walk us through that? Is Socrates giving any information on what might come after this? Because this system is just not working, and it hasn't worked for quite some time.
No, I think that's basically what 2032, the computer's been projecting. And you have to understand, it just doesn't pull this stuff out of the thin air. We go through these periods of time, like we overthrew monarchy, at the end of the 18th century. All right. Unfortunately, they chose a republic rather than democracy. They rejected the Greek model and took the Roman model. But throughout history, I mean, even in ancient times, I laughed when Tiananmen Square happened. And then they said, oh, it's communications. That's why Berlin Wall fell. No, you get these contagions, just as in markets, but it's also in politics. Rome overthrew their Tarquin king in 509 BC, and within 6 months, Greece goes, oh, that's a good idea. They overthrow their tyrants and democracy's born. All right. And then sweeps the whole Mediterranean area. So these are not unique events. All right. They're part of humanity. That's how we are, basically. And for example, when I was called into the 87 crash with the Presidential Commission, all right, there was a professor, and he said, we're going to find the guy that shorted this market, made it go down. And I just said, excuse me, do you understand how a market even functions? Oh, I teach finance. I said, that's very nice. But they never traded, all right? They think somebody comes in with a huge short position, forces it down. No, everybody's long, all right? The slightest news, all right? And all of a sudden, if 90% of the people are long, you got 90% sellers. And then they try to sell, and you pick up the phone, you call the broker, and what's the broker say? There's no bid. All right. And then you get it crashes 1,000 points because there's nobody there. You're not going to catch a falling knife. This is the way humanity works. It doesn't matter if we're talking about markets or we're talking about politics. Okay. Once you lose that confidence, boom, that's it. It takes us a long time to gain that confidence. That's why a bull market is always longer and drawn out. A bear market, very short, sweet, and to the point. 29, low, 32. Same, look at all the charts. You'll see the bear markets come down very fast and furious. 2007, lows 2009. right? But it takes a long time to get up there. That's just humanity. So this time, I think, what we're seeing is that everybody's, just as you said, this isn't working. All right. The more people that understand that are going to demand the political change. Okay. That's what 2032 is about. And then hopefully at that time, we get a constitutional convention per se. And maybe somebody will look at this podcast and say, maybe they were right. Maybe we should look at a direct democracy this time instead of a republic. A republic is, I can run for anything. Look, I know how politics works. I want to run for Congress. I can tell you anything you want to hear. I'll save the whales. I'll do this. Then I get there. All right. The meeting comes. All right. Great. You're here. This is how it works. Just look at all the votes down party line. Guys in the back room make the decision. You don't. That's a republic. So I can run. I'll do anything you want me to say, but I can't do it. Simple as that. That's real politics. That's what's got to change. And, I knew, when the Tea Party was there and 80 of them got in and they refused to follow in that meeting. So what did the head of Republicans do, Bonner? He removed anybody from every committee having anything to do with finance if they were related to the Tea Party. They retaliate. He refused to allow anybody to have Ron Paul's name even mentioned at the convention for a nomination for president. This is the back office bullshit. And that's what's got to be cleaned out.
Yes, and let's hope sanity does prevail at some point. Tell us about Armstrong Economics and the Socrates platform.
Well, we've been around for probably more than 50 years at this point. And we try to keep it as an open forum. We don't sell advertising. You don't have to put your email in. We're not sending you, 30 emails a day by, trying to sell you swampland in Florida or something. We have a paid, system, Socrates, to access the computer. It forecasts more than 1,000 instruments every day, and it's completely AI generated. The computer's forecasting the world, so it's not biased. You don't have somebody, picking up the phone and say, "Hey, spin it this way or that way or whatever." There aren't enough analysts in the world to cover everything it does.
Great. Well, I'm going to put a link in the description to both Armstrong Economics and the Socrates platform for people who want to check that out. Martin, as always, love talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Jesse. Take care over there.
Thank you for joining us today. This episode is brought to you by ARC Silver, Gold, Osmium. They have some great prices on silver and gold bullion products. They are displayed on your screen right now. These are subject to change and while supplies last, so make sure to reach out to owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And represent sound money in style with the official Stack Silver Not Fiat t-shirt available in the Commodity Culture shop using the link in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.